She thought the debt would destroy her. Until the most dangerous man in Chicago said, "Come here." One secret, one choice, one night that changed everything. But when a mafia boss decides to protect you, what does it really cost? Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The Velvet Eclipse never truly slept. Even at 2:17 a.m., the bass from the main floor still pulsed through the walls like a distant heartbeat, heavy and unrelenting. Claire Bennett moved through the private office on the top floor with practiced silence, her black bartender uniform blending into the shadows. She wiped the heavy mahogany desk with slow, careful strokes, making sure not a single fingerprint remained. She wasn't supposed to be here. The schedule had been very clear. This office stayed empty until morning. Special cleaning shift, in and out. No one would know she had ever stepped inside the sanctum of Cole Harlan, the man who owned this club, and half the city's underworld. Claire straightened a stack of papers, her hands steady from years of hiding fear behind routine. She told herself she was just doing her job. Just another night. Just another way to scrape together enough money for Max's next hospital visit. Then the door opened. Not the soft service entrance she had used. The main door. Heavy, deliberate. Claire froze mid-motion, the cleaning cloth still clutched in her fingers. Her pulse slammed against her ribs as she turned slowly. Cole Harlan stood in the doorway. He filled the frame without even trying. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black coat that still carried the cold night air of Chicago. His dark hair was cut short, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, but it was his eyes, steel gray, cold as winter on the lake, that pinned her in place. He didn't speak. For several long seconds, the only sound was the muffled thump of music far below and the frantic beating of her own heart. Claire's mouth went dry. She should say something. Apologize. Explain that she was only following the cleaning roster, that she would be gone in 2 minutes, that she was sorry for the intrusion. But the words stuck in her throat. Cole's gaze moved over her. Slow, assessing, missing nothing. Then he stepped inside and closed the door behind him with a quiet click that sounded far too final. "Come here," he said. His voice was low, rough, carrying the weight of a man who was never refused. Claire didn't move. Her legs felt locked to the floor. He tilted his head slightly, studying her the way a predator studies something small that wandered into its territory by mistake. I said, "Come here." There was no anger in his tone, no threat, only absolute certainty. Something in Claire's chest tightened. Fear, yes, but also a strange, reckless curiosity. She had heard the stories about Cole Harlan. Everyone in the club had. They called him the Shadow of Chicago, the man who ruled from the darkness and made problems disappear without a trace. And now he was looking straight at her. Claire forced her feet to move. One step, then another. The carpet swallowed her footsteps as she crossed the room. When she stopped in front of him, close enough to catch the faint scent of whiskey and cedar on his coat, Cole turned without another word and walked toward the far wall, the one lined with heavy bookshelves no one was ever allowed to touch. He pressed his thumb against a hidden panel. A soft mechanical click echoed. A section of the bookshelf swung open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit room behind it. Claire's breath caught. Cole glanced back at her, his gray eyes unreadable. "Let me show you something." Every instinct screamed at her to run, to mutter an excuse and slip out the service door before this man decided she had seen too much. But her feet followed him anyway, pulled by something stronger than fear. The desperate, exhausted hope that maybe, just maybe, This was not the end of her. Inside the hidden room, the air was cooler. One desk lamp cast a circle of warm light over a wall of monitors displaying live feeds from every corner of the Velvet Eclipse. Cameras in the VIP rooms, the bar, the alley behind the club, everything. Cole reached for a manila folder on the desk and held it out to her. Claire took it with trembling fingers. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph, grainy but clear enough. A man in a dark coat standing near the club's side entrance, eyes scanning the crowd like a hunter. Her stomach dropped. Victor Kane. The man who had loaned her $70,000 6 months ago when Max's heart condition had taken a terrifying turn. The man who had smiled while promising flexible terms. Then started calling at 3 a.m., showing up outside their apartment, sending Rico Morales to leave notes with numbers that grew larger every week. The man who last week had grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise and whispered that there were other ways to repay a debt. Claire's hands began to shake so badly the photo blurred. "He came into my club," Cole said quietly. His voice hadn't risen, but the temperature in the small room seemed to drop. "Twice this week. Asked about you by name, described you, your shifts, your face." Claire looked up at him, her throat tight. "How do you—" "I know everything that happens in this building." Cole paused, his steel gray eyes never leaving hers. "And I know when someone is hunting." The word landed between them like a stone in still water. He pulled out a chair from behind the desk. "Sit down, Claire." It wasn't quite an order. It was the voice of a man who could see her legs were about to give out. She sat, her palms pressed flat against her thighs, trying to stop the trembling. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of this man she didn't know and had every reason to fear. Cole leaned against the edge of the desk, arms crossed, watching her with that same unreadable intensity. "Tell me everything," he said. "Start from the beginning." Claire stared at the photograph still clutched in her hands. She thought of Max, only 8 years old, lying in his small bed with monitors beeping softly, his little chest rising and falling too quickly. She thought of the hospital bills piling up like snowdrifts. She thought of how tired she was of being afraid every single day. And when she finally spoke, the words came out broken at first, then faster, like water rushing through a crack in a dam she had been holding closed for months. She told him about Max, about the diagnosis, about the surgery Dr. Elena Torres said her brother needed before it was too late, about how she had found Victor Kane through someone at the club who swore the terms were reasonable, about how the interest had exploded, about the midnight calls, about Rico Morales waiting outside their building, about the bruise on her wrist she still hid under long sleeves. Through it all, Cole Harlan didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty comfort or false promises. He simply listened, those cold gray eyes absorbing every word as if he were carving them into stone. When she finally fell silent, the hidden room felt smaller. The neon glow from the monitors painted faint blue and red across his face. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, his voice low and even, "How much do you owe him now?" $70,000, Claire whispered. "He says it's more with interest. He's lying. But I can't prove it." Cole's jaw tightened just slightly. "He preys on people who can't afford lawyers, people who have no one else." Claire looked up at him, her voice cracking with exhaustion and something sharper. "And what do you do, Mr. Harlan?" The question hung in the air, reckless and raw. Cole held her gaze. For the first time, something flickered behind the steel. Not anger, but a quiet, dangerous respect. I do a great many things most people would rather not know about, he said slowly. But I don't hurt people who don't deserve it. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't know if she believed him, but in that moment, sitting in the hidden room with neon light, painting her face and the photograph of Victor Kane still burning in her hands, she realized one terrifying truth. She had no other choice. And Cole Harlan, the most dangerous man in Chicago, was looking at her like she was no longer invisible. Here is part 2. The Weight of Secrets, written to seamlessly continue from the end of part 1. Cole Harlan didn't move. He remained leaning against the edge of the desk, arms still crossed over his chest, those steel gray eyes fixed on her with unnerving patience. The monitors behind him cast shifting patterns of light across the small hidden room, turning his face into something half shadow, half stone. Claire swallowed hard. Her fingers were still wrapped around the photograph of Victor Kane, as if letting go would make the nightmare more real. She hadn't planned to tell him anything, but the silence stretched between them, heavy and expectant, until the words began to spill out. Quiet at first, then raw, unstoppable. My brother, Max. He's only 8. Her voice cracked on his name. She stared down at her hands, seeing instead the small hospital bed where Max lay connected to machines that beeped too loudly in the quiet hours. He was born with a heart defect. The doctors said it was manageable at first, but last year it got worse. Doctor, Elena Torres told me he needs surgery soon, before his body can't handle it anymore. Claire drew in a shaky breath. The air in the hidden room felt thinner. I didn't have the money. The hospital bills were already crushing us. I asked around, quietly. Someone at the club mentioned Victor Kane, said the terms were flexible, that he helped people who had nowhere else to turn. A bitter laugh escaped her, barely more than a whisper. I believed him. $70,000. He smiled when he handed me the money. Told me not to worry about the interest, that we could work something out. She closed her eyes for a moment, the memory of that handshake still burning on her skin. Then the calls started. Midnight. 3 in the morning. The amount kept growing. When I couldn't pay, Rico Morales began showing up. He'd wait outside our building, leaning against his car, just watching. Last week he grabbed my wrist so hard I still feel it when I move. He said there were other ways to settle the debt. Claire's hand unconsciously drifted to her sleeve, as if she could still hide the fading bruise beneath the fabric. Her voice dropped even lower. I'm terrified he'll come for Max next. My little brother doesn't understand any of this. He just asks me every night when I'll be home early enough to read him his dinosaur book. And I keep telling him, soon. But I don't know how much longer I can keep him safe. The last words hung in the air, fragile and exhausted. Cole remained perfectly still the entire time. He didn't interrupt. He didn't lean forward with pity or offer quick reassurances. He simply listened, his gray eyes absorbing every fractured detail like a man cataloging weapons for a war he had already decided to fight. When Claire finally fell silent, the weight of everything she had carried alone for months pressed down on her chest. She felt exposed, raw, waiting for judgment or worse, indifference. Cole exhaled slowly. My mother was killed when I was 14, he said, his voice low and even, stripped of any emotion that might crack it. A territorial war between families. She got caught in the crossfire because she worked at a bar that belonged to the wrong side. I watched them drag her body out of the alley like she was nothing. He paused, just long enough for the image to settle between them. I was too young to stop it, too weak to do anything but remember. Claire lifted her gaze to meet his. For the first time, she saw something beneath the steel. Not softness, but a deep, frozen rage that had been tempered into something far more dangerous. Cole straightened, pushing away from the desk. "No one is allowed to hunt what belongs to me." The words were simple, quiet, yet they carried the finality of a locked door. Claire's heart stuttered. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to. But trust was a luxury she had lost long ago. Before she could respond, the hidden door clicked open behind them. A man stepped inside, mid-30s, dark hair slicked back, wearing a tailored black suit that spoke of money and careful violence. His eyes, sharp and suspicious, landed immediately on Claire. "Cole," he said, voice tight. "We have a situation downstairs. And who the hell is she?" Cole didn't look away from Claire. "Luca," he answered calmly. "This is Claire Bennett. She works the bar." Luca Rossi's gaze narrowed. He studied her like she was a puzzle that might explode at any second. "A bartender in your private surveillance room at 2 a.m? Luca stepped closer, his tone edged with warning. "You sure she's not working for Kane or Holt? They've been trying to plant eyes in our territory for months." Claire felt the blood drain from her face. She gripped the arms of the chair tighter, fear spiking fresh and cold through her veins. "I'm not," she started, but her voice came out small. Cole raised one hand, cutting her off gently but firmly. "She's not a spy, Luca." Luca didn't look convinced. He crossed his arms, mirroring Cole's earlier stance. "You're risking a lot on a pretty face and a sob story. If word gets out that you're bringing outsiders into this room, then handle it quietly," Cole said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Right now, I need you to make sure Victor Kane's men don't get anywhere near this building tonight." Luca hesitated, clearly unhappy, but he gave a short nod. "As you say, boss." He shot one last wary glance at Claire before slipping back out, the hidden door clicking shut behind him. The room fell quiet again. Claire's shoulders trembled slightly as the adrenaline began to ebb. She looked up at Cole, searching his face for any sign of deception. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Cole regarded her for a long moment, the steel in his eyes softening by the smallest fraction. Just enough for her to glimpse the man beneath the legend. "Because I remember what it feels like when no one comes," he said simply. He didn't promise to fix everything. He didn't swear revenge or offer grand declarations. He simply stood there, solid and unyielding, as if his presence alone was the beginning of an answer. And for the first time in months, Claire felt the faintest flicker of something dangerous bloom in her chest. Not quite hope, but something close enough to scare her even more than the fear had. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended haze. Claire returned to the Velvet Eclipse as if nothing had changed. She poured drinks behind the long obsidian bar, smiled politely at the VIP guests who never really saw her, and wiped down sticky counters until her shoulders ached. But everything felt different now. She noticed it first on the walk home that same night. A tall, broad-shouldered man fell into step beside her just as she left the staff exit. He wore a dark jacket, hands tucked casually into his pockets, face half hidden by the collar. Rowan Hale. She recognized him from the club, one of Cole Harlan's most trusted men. He didn't speak. He simply walked with her through the cold Chicago streets, his presence steady and silent, until she reached the front door of her rundown apartment building. When she turned to thank him, he only gave a short nod and waited until she was safely inside, before disappearing back into the night. The second night, It happened again. Same quiet footsteps. Same unspoken escort. By the third night, Claire no longer jumped when she sensed him behind her. She found herself breathing a little easier with every block they covered together. Small things kept shifting around her. Mrs. Gloria Hayes, the elderly neighbor who sometimes watched Max after school, mentioned in passing that a kind stranger had driven her to the free clinic for a full checkup and even paid for her new blood pressure medication. The old woman's eyes sparkled with quiet gratitude as she told the story, knitting needles clicking steadily in her lap. Claire listened, heart tightening, but said nothing. Then came the messages. Lena Vargas, her closest friend at the club, pulled her aside during a quiet moment between sets. "Someone asked me to give you this," Lena whispered, slipping a folded note into Claire's hand. "Didn't say who. Just told me to make sure you read it." Claire unfolded the paper in the dim light of the staff locker room. Victor Kane will not step foot in Harlan territory again. No signature. Just 8 words in clean, decisive handwriting. She stared at the note for a long time, fingers tracing the sharp lines of the letters. A strange warmth bloomed low in her chest. Fragile, unfamiliar, and terrifying in its own way. Cole never appeared in person. He moved through the club like smoke, present in the lowered voices of the security team, in the way the bartenders suddenly became more careful, in the subtle shift of power that rippled through the Velvet Eclipse. Claire would catch glimpses of him sometimes. A dark figure at the top of the stairs, a silhouette against the neon glow, eyes finding hers for the briefest second before he vanished again. Each time their gazes met, something electric passed between them. Not desire. Not yet. Something quieter, deeper, like recognition. On the afternoon of the third day, Claire took the bus to St. Agnes Hospital to visit Max during her break. She expected the usual routine. Signing in, sitting by his bed, reading from the worn dinosaur book while trying not to let him see how scared she still was. But when she reached the pediatric cardiology wing, the nurse at the desk gave her a warm, surprised smile. "Miss Bennett, there's been a change in your brother's file." Claire's stomach dropped. What kind of change? The nurse checked her tablet again, brows lifting. "All outstanding balances have been cleared. The full surgical package with Dr. Elena Torres has been approved and prepaid. We're scheduling the procedure for next week." Claire stood frozen in the brightly lit hallway, the sounds of beeping monitors and children's laughter fading into a distant hum. She gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles turning white. Who paid for it?" The nurse shook her head gently. "The donor requested complete anonymity. They only left a note for you." She handed Claire a small white envelope. Inside was a single sentence, written in the same clean handwriting as the earlier message. "He deserves to turn 9. Claire pressed the paper to her chest, eyes stinging with sudden tears. She didn't know whether to laugh or sob. The weight she had carried alone for so long, the crushing fear that she would lose her little brother, had been lifted without a single demand, without a single condition. That evening, after her shift, she found herself walking slowly toward the small chapel attached to the back of the club. She didn't know why her feet carried her there. Maybe it was the need to breathe somewhere quiet. Inside the dimly lit chapel, a man in simple black clergy attire stood near the altar, arranging fresh candles. He turned when he heard her footsteps. Father Michael. She had seen him before, offering quiet counsel to some of the club's longtime staff, but they had never spoken. "Claire Bennett," he said softly, as if he had been expecting her. "Cole asked me to be here if you needed someone to talk to." Claire hesitated in the doorway, fingers twisting together. I don't understand why he's doing all this, she whispered. He doesn't know me. He doesn't owe me anything. Father Michael smiled gently, the lines around his eyes deepening with quiet wisdom. Cole carries a lot of ghosts from his past. Protecting a woman and a child, it may be his way of trying to quiet them. He stepped closer, voice lowering with gentle conviction. Sometimes the strongest redemption isn't found in violence or power. It's found in choosing to shield what the world tries to break. Claire stood there for a long moment, letting the words settle over her like warm rain. She still didn't fully trust Cole Harlan. The fear was still there, coiled tight in her chest. But beneath it, something new was stirring, a fragile, trembling hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone anymore. And for the first time in years, that thought didn't scare her as much as it should have. Here is part 4, The Price of Trust, written to continue seamlessly from the end of part 3. The call came at 3:12 p.m. on a gray Thursday afternoon. Claire was wiping down the bar when her phone vibrated violently in her pocket. Lena Vargas's name flashed on the screen. Claire, listen to me carefully, Lena said, voice tight and low. Rico Morales was at Max's school. He almost got to him. Rowan pulled the boy out just in time. You need to leave right now. I'm waiting outside the staff door. Claire's world narrowed to a single point of ice in her chest. She didn't remember grabbing her coat or running through the back corridors. She only remembered Lena's car already running at the curb, tires screeching as they pulled away into Chicago traffic. 20 minutes later, they arrived at a quiet brownstone on the edge of Harlan territory. The house looked ordinary from the outside. Red brick, white trim, a small front porch with potted plants. But once inside, Claire felt the difference immediately. Reinforced doors, subtle cameras in the corners. A silence that spoke of safety, bought with power. Lena led her upstairs to a bright living room, where Max sat on the couch, small hands clutching his dinosaur backpack, eyes wide but trying to be brave. Claire, he cried, launching himself into her arms. She held him tight, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo, her heart still hammering from the fear that had nearly swallowed her whole. Then the door opened again. Cole Harlan stepped inside. He looked different here. Coat off, sleeves rolled up, the hard edges of the club softened by daylight. His steel-gray eyes found hers first, then moved to Max. Cole crouched down slowly so he was eye level with the boy. Hey, Max, he said, voice surprisingly gentle. My name is Cole. I know you've been scared lately, but I want you to know something important. Max stared at him, curious and cautious at the same time. I'm going to make sure no one hurts you or your sister again, not Victor Kane, not anyone. And I'm not asking for anything in return. This isn't a deal. It's a promise. Max glanced up at Claire, searching her face for permission to believe. She managed a small nod, even though her throat felt too tight to speak. Cole stayed crouched there a moment longer, letting the boy study him before he rose and turned to Claire. They moved to the kitchen so Max could watch cartoons in the next room with Lena. Cole poured 2 glasses of water and slid one across the table to her. Victor Kane is only a pawn, he said quietly. The real player is Raymond Holt, a city councilman who smiles for the cameras while he funnels dirty money through men like Kane. Predatory loans, extortion, political bribes. He's been building an empire on the backs of people who have no voice. Claire's fingers tightened around the glass. And you've been watching him. Cole nodded once. I've been gathering evidence for over a year. Financial records, communication logs, everything. But records don't speak in court. Juries need faces, voices. They need someone who can stand up and say exactly what Kane and his men did. The threats, the midnight calls, the bruises. He met her eyes steadily. I need you to be that voice, Claire. A living witness. The silence that followed felt enormous. Claire stared at the wooden table, memories flashing behind her eyes. Rico's cold smile, the grip on her wrist, Max's frightened face when she came home late with tears she couldn't hide. She lifted her chin slowly. I'll do it, she said, voice quieter than she wanted but steady. But I have one condition. Cole waited. You won't kill them, neither Kane nor Holt. You let the law handle it, all the way. No shortcuts, no disappearances in the night. Something shifted in Cole's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or the first crack in the armor he wore like second skin. Before he could answer, the front door opened and Luca Rossi stormed in, tension rolling off him in waves. You can't be serious, Luca said sharply, looking between them. Bringing her in as a witness, putting her on record against Holt and Kane? That's painting a target on both their backs. One leak and the whole thing explodes. We handle this our way. Clean, quiet, final. Claire's heart raced, but she didn't look away from Cole. I'm not asking for your protection if it means becoming like them, she said, surprising even herself with the strength in her voice. If you want me to trust you, then show me you're different. Luca opened his mouth to argue, but another voice cut through the room, calm, measured, carrying years of quiet authority. Luca has a point about the danger, Father Michael said as he stepped into the kitchen from the hallway. But Claire has a deeper one. True justice doesn't begin by becoming the monster you're trying to stop. The priest looked directly at Cole, eyes steady and kind. Protecting a woman and a child is one thing. Choosing to let the law finish what you started, that may be the hardest redemption of all. Cole stood very still. The room felt thick with unspoken history, old wounds, old choices, the long shadow of his mother's death. Claire watched him wrestle with it, saw the battle behind those steel-gray eyes. Control versus trust, vengeance versus something harder. Finally, Cole exhaled slowly. You have my word, he said, looking straight at her. No blood. We do this clean, through the DA's office. Official channels only. Luca muttered a curse under his breath and stalked out, the door closing harder than necessary. Claire felt her shoulders drop, tension bleeding out of her in a shaky rush. She was no longer just the frightened bartender hiding in the shadows. For the first time, she had used her voice, and Cole Harlan had listened. As he stood there watching her, something new passed between them. Not quite warmth, not yet love, but the beginning of real trust, and with it came a fragile, terrifying hope that maybe they could both find a way out of the darkness, together. The arrests made the evening news in bold headlines. Victor Kane and Raymond Holt were taken into custody during a coordinated raid on the Upper East Side. Claire watched the footage on the small television in the safe house, her arm wrapped tightly around Max's shoulders. She saw Kane's face twisted in fury as federal agents led him away in handcuffs. She saw Holt, the polished councilman, trying to maintain his calm mask even as the cameras rolled. It was over. The evidence she had given, every threatening phone call, every late-night visit, every bruise, combined with Cole's meticulously gathered files, had been enough. The DA's office moved swiftly. Bail was denied for both men. The network they had built began to unravel in real time. 2 weeks later, Claire stood outside a modest brownstone on a quiet street, keys in hand. The apartment was on the second floor. 2 bedrooms. Warm light spilled from the windows. The rent was fair, market rate, nothing more. It sat close to the hospital where Dr. Elena Torres worked and to a school equipped for children with special medical needs. Cole had arranged it without fanfare, just as he had promised. Max's surgery had gone perfectly. Dr. Torres had come out of the operating room with a tired but genuine smile, telling Claire that her brother's heart was stronger now than it had ever been. Every day since, Max's color improved. His energy returned in small bursts. Running a few careful steps down the hallway, laughing louder when he read about T-Rex. Claire helped him settle into the new apartment, hanging his dinosaur drawings on the refrigerator with magnets. For the first time in years, she slept through the night without waking in panic. Then, on a cold December evening, just as the first snow began to fall, there was a quiet knock at the door. Claire opened it to find Cole Harlan standing on the threshold. He wasn't dressed as the shadow of Chicago tonight. No long black coat hiding weapons, just a dark sweater, 2 cups of coffee in his hands, and a brightly wrapped package tucked under one arm. "I brought something for Max," he said simply. Max appeared behind Claire in an instant, eyes lighting up. "Is that a dinosaur book?" Cole's mouth curved into the faintest smile. "Only one way to find out." He stepped inside, bringing the cold night air with him. The apartment felt smaller with him in it, yet somehow warmer. Max tore into the wrapping paper with delight, exclaiming over the colorful illustrations of prehistoric creatures. While Max was absorbed in his new book, Cole turned to Claire. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn book of poetry. The spine was soft from years of handling. A folded corner marked one particular page. "This belonged to my mother," he said quietly. "She used to read it to me when the world felt too heavy." He opened the book and handed it to her. Claire took it carefully. Her eyes scanned the underlined passage. Words about shelter, not made of walls or roofs, but of choosing again and again to protect what is fragile in a world that wants to break it. She closed the book and held it against her chest, feeling the weight of everything it represented. "Cole?" she whispered. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the subtle lines of exhaustion and old pain etched around his eyes. "I didn't do any of this to make you owe me," he said. "Not the surgery, not the apartment, not even the arrests." His steel-gray eyes held hers with a depth she had never seen before. "I did it because I finally found someone who understands what it means to carry too much for too long and still choose to stand." Claire felt tears rise, but this time they weren't born from fear or exhaustion. They came from something deeper: recognition. 2 damaged souls who had walked through darkness separately now stood in the same gentle light. Later that week, Mrs. Gloria Hayes insisted on hosting a small Thanksgiving dinner in her apartment downstairs. The table was crowded but warm. Lena Vargas brought wine and laughter. Rowan Hale carved the turkey with surprising skill. Luca Rossi sat at the far end, still a little stiff. But when he raised his glass toward Claire, there was genuine respect in his eyes. "I was wrong about you," he admitted quietly when no one else was listening. "You're stronger than I thought." Father Michael offered a simple blessing before the meal, his words lingering softly in the room. As the evening wound down, Claire stood at the kitchen sink rinsing plates while Cole dried them beside her. Snow fell steadily outside the window, blanketing the city in quiet white. Cole set down the towel and turned to her. "I'm not good at saying the things that matter," he said, voice low. "But I want you to know. I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you ask me to." Claire looked up at him, heart full in a way she had never allowed herself to imagine. She didn't say, "I love you." Not yet. Instead, she reached out and gently touched his hand. "Stay," she whispered. Cole's fingers closed around hers, careful, steady, warm. In that moment, the door to the apartment closed behind them, not to hide secrets or lock out danger, but to hold something precious inside. Something whole, something healing, something they had built together from the broken pieces of their pasts. And for the first time in a very long time, Cole Harlan, the man they once called the most dangerous in Chicago, stepped fully into the light, choosing love and protection over the shadows he had known so well. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths. Some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.